Hey friends, so most of the time when folks think about parallel processing, they think about using the dry-wet knob, for example, on like a compressor or something like that. But this is only one way to think of parallel processing. Another way to think of it is what we like to call parallel buses. And so in this video, hopefully this will represent somewhat of a sea change in how you think about parallel processing, and hopefully this will really give you some awesome things that you can take moving forward. And real quick, before we get into it, I think it's always fun to have a nice A/B test to hear the result of what I'm about to show you before we get into it. And if you want this Ableton set, it's available to download below. I've used all Ableton devices in this. So let's go ahead and listen to before and after. So this is before. After. Also, real quick, before we get into it, obviously, I am just ahead talking to you because I have an awesome surprise to reveal here in a couple weeks. But for now, let's get into it. So here's a common problem that folks have, and that's that they have a really boring drum beat. So to my ears, this drum beat is lacking all kinds of stuff. There's no body. It tends to sound a little dull. There's really no sharp attacks on the drum hits. All kinds of things could be improved by doing some parallel bus processing. So the first effect I want to reveal to you is, I'm just calling the track Vocoder, but let's just listen to the difference adding this effect and taking it out. Whoa, what is happening here? So what I'm using, obviously, is a vocoder, okay? And what I'm doing is I'm using the internal noise generator to create an envelope of top end, okay? So let's go ahead and I'm gonna break down how to actually do this. So in order to do this from scratch, what we're gonna do is we're gonna actually delete this track completely because I wanna show you how to actually set up the routing. So let's go ahead and we'll insert an audio track. I'm gonna call this vocoder. Now, I'm gonna grab a vocoder and slap it in there. What I need to do also is choose my drum kit as the input to this track. Okay, so this is how you set up parallel buses. So I'm going to choose drum kit as my input, and then of course I need to monitor the input to actually hear the drum kit. So let's go ahead and turn the vocoder off. What will happen right away when you do this is you're just gonna double the volume of the original track. Why? Because now you have two tracks playing simultaneously the exact same audio. Right? Clipping. If I turn it all the way down, right? It's just quiet or loud. But what we can do, and what's so awesome about this is that this workflow forces you to listen. It forces you to mix. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn on the vocoder. Now what the vocoder is gonna do by default is it's going to be in its noise mode. And what this does is it basically is an envelope follower for generating noise, okay? Noise bursts. Let's go ahead and I'll turn this down a little bit and let's listen to the result. Right? So we can hear some noise being added to this drum beat. Obviously, this is lasting too long. It's not very bright. It doesn't really give us anything other than maybe a somewhat interesting like noise layer, right? Maybe you could put a flanger on it and that would be fun. I don't know. But in this case, what we're doing is we're trying to enhance the drums. So I felt like this drum beat was a little dull. So what I can do with the vocoder that's so cool is that I can actually tune the noise, okay? I don't really need low-end noise to be generated, so I can actually use my pencil tool, which if you hover over this area right here, this is how you actually turn up or down each individual generated band. Now right now I'm using the 20 bands mode, but you could use all kinds of different modes here to hone in on what you want to do. I'm gonna leave it on 20 now, and I'm just gonna sweep out everything but the highs. And I'm going to kind of gradually sweep up to the highs. And we can adjust this later, but let's go ahead and listen to the result. Now, it's kind of hard to hear, but we can hear that there's somewhat of an enhancement. Let's go ahead and turn up the release time so we can really hear the tuning, okay, of what the vocoder is doing. Now that sounds pretty good and it sounds brighter, right? But obviously we have too much decay. But it's obviously also pretty quiet, isn't it? So the next thing we can do is grab a utility. And we can put it after this. And let's go ahead and add a really good amount of gain, maybe like 20 dB. And what I'll do is I'll turn this down, okay? And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna slowly introduce this. Cool. So now I can hear this, and it's an obvious effect. And now the last thing that I need to do, of course, is to turn the release time down because I want this to be snappy. This is supposed to be adding, brightness to my transient attack, especially if you're making EDM music or, electronic music, techno, things like that. Having a really bright attack is a great way to get a lot more perceived volume out of drums without actually having them challenge your limiter as much. So let's go ahead and turn this release time down until it sounds good. Let's go ahead and turn this up a little bit. Great. So now let's go ahead and turn this on and off and listen to the difference. Now, maybe one final thing that I would do is I would work on the tuning of this a little bit. Right now, this is a pretty broad kind of, just give me a bright attacked envelope, right? That's what I'm asking the vocoder to do right now. But the tweaks that I would do is kind of mess around with the curve and then, of course, mess around with the release time. It's still pretty long. I can pull this release time down a little bit more, and I can maybe work on the tuning. So yet again, without it, with it. Now, those of you seasoned pros who are listening to this, you might think that this is a little too intense. Well, some feedback that I've gotten recently is that a lot of folks are listening on less than ideal playback systems, and so the moves that I'm doing here are potentially a little bit more drastic than I would normally do to make sure that everybody can hear the differences, okay? Cool, so let's go ahead and move on to the next parallel bus, and that's the compressor. So commonly, and this is how I kind of introduced this whole video idea, and that's that, a lot of folks are using the dry wet. They'll put the compressor on the actual drum kit and then they'll use the dry wet control to blend in the compressor. You don't necessarily have to do it this way. You can also use a compressor as a parallel bus here. And so I'll show you why this is cool too, but the first thing that I want to show you is that I'm using this compressor setting as kind of a way to give the drums some oomph, some transient attack to get them to be beefier on the snare and the kick hits. So let's go ahead and first of all listen to this with and without the compressor. And again, I'm gonna crank it a little bit to really hear that difference. So without it, with it. Now, I know that obviously this is louder. Okay, when I turn on this compressor, this is going to be louder, okay? So let's do one more pass and I'll volume adjust for the compressor being in there or not in there. So the differences that I hear is that, of course, there's now more thud or attack. And the way that I did that with this glue compressor instance is I've turned the attack way up. So whenever the threshold is hit, it takes it, a longer time. It takes it, in this case, 10 milliseconds to actually push the volume down. And so what we're doing is we're allowing 10 extra milliseconds of full blast, 14 decibel boost to that kick and that snare, thus causing the drums to sound like they have more attack, okay? And so this is yet again a blendable feature. So let's go ahead and we're going to work with both of these parallel buses to blend these into taste. So here's my original drum loop. Let's add some more of that compressor in there so we can get more thud and thwack to the drums, right? Oh, I love it. And now let's go ahead and add some of that bright top end. Beautiful. Hey, if you're enjoying this video and you're serious about your music, I just want you to know that I offer Ableton online courses that feature hours and hours of structured video lessons just like this one that will fast-track your music production. These courses cover the 4 main directions you can go with Ableton: songwriting, mixing and mastering, sound design, and live performance and looping. Between all 4, there are over 100 hours of organized and chronological video lessons designed to raise your skills and knowledge quickly and efficiently. This isn't some grifty subscription service. When you enroll in Seed to Stage, you get lifetime access to the course content. To my knowledge, these are the most thorough courses on Ableton that exist, and I stand by the quality and effectiveness of the content to the degree that if you're not satisfied, you get a 30-day refund period if you're not feeling it. These courses are constantly being updated as Ableton rolls out new features. You can see all kinds of rave reviews about them. We welcome all genres and all walks of life. I hope to see you in the course community. All right, let's get back to the video. Okay, let's look at the next parallel bus, and that is some distortion. So I'm using a saturator here, and word to the wise, I think that this is sort of unintuitive for a lot of people, like looking at mixing this way. But when you're mixing, you never listen to things in isolation, right? You're always listening to things in relation to other things, okay? So, it might seem counterintuitive to use a distortion without really being able to hear the distortion. But if you intend to use the distortion as a parallel effect, okay, and in this case, I'm using the distortion to add a little bit more presence and to add a little bit more, just a little bit longer sustain to each one of the hits, then it makes sense to use it in a parallel fashion. But if that's not intuitive to you, something you can always do is take the saturator and drag it over and put it on the normal drum kit, okay? So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be listening to the effect of the saturator by itself, and we'll go ahead and turn off our parallel buses for now. Let's go ahead and listen to this. So that's the sound of my saturator, and I intend for this sound to be blended with the dry signal, okay? So we can kind of tune this a little bit. So I'm turning my amount low down a little bit to make it so that the kick drum is not triggering so much sideband material. Let's switch it over to hard clip. I actually like the sound of soft clip. And maybe I'll turn off my high quality mode. Maybe I'll turn on DC filter. Cool, I like that sound. So now I can take this and put this on my distortion parallel bus, and again, it's routed with the input switch on, and what I can do is I can go ahead and blend this in with my original, okay? So I'll turn this down. Just beautiful. I love the way that complements the original drum kit. Now let's go ahead and turn on our other parallel buses. So without it, and with it. Cool, so before I really blend this one in, let's go ahead and listen to the last one. And this is just using an overdrive, and here's another advantage to doing parallel bus processing. So the overdrive, what's cool about using overdrive is that you can tune it. Let's go ahead and do this from scratch. So I'm gonna grab an overdrive, I'm gonna drag it onto this track. So when I turn the overdrive bus on, it's gonna sound like total crap. Right? But what's cool about overdrive is that it actually has a tunable filter using this little XY thing, and I can actually choose to emphasize some part of the spectrum. So in this case, let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to turn the drive up a little bit so we can really hear what's going on here. So this sounds pretty cool, right? Except the snare drum really isn't that desirable, right? It's going, right? It's making a terrible sound. Well, we can actually further tweak this. First of all, something to look at is the dynamics. So basically what this does is this sort of like applies somewhat of a compressor or an envelope over top of the overdrive's output. At lower settings, the snare drum is kind of treated equally with the rest of the drums, and that's sort of what I want. Now, another thing I want is I want the dry wet to be all the way up, right? Because I want this to be a completely wet effect. So now that I've got this sort of dialed in, let's go ahead and we'll bring it in along with the original. Doesn't take much, does it? Right? The next thing I'm going to show you is that I can actually use an EQ over just this aspect of my drum mix, okay? I can just EQ the overdrive parallel bus. So I'll go ahead and grab an EQ8, and let's go ahead and listen to this. Maybe I'll turn this up way higher than I normally would, and I'm going to filter out frequencies that I don't like. Oh, that one's just so bad, right? Nice little mid-range boost there. So now I'm going to turn this all the way down, and I'm going to blend it until I like it. Cool. So now that sounds pretty good. Let's go ahead and add the rest of our parallel buses. Right? Let's go ahead and I'm going to set up key mapping. Let's go ahead and use our Q key to turn off all the parallel bus processing along with this original drum loop. And again, I'm going to go ahead and volume match, even though you can't see it here in the editing, the post-editing of this video, I will volume match the difference so you can really hear. right? So this is such a powerful thing, and I'm going to show you yet another reason why here in just a little bit. But the next thing that I'd like to do is turn on this bass bus. So let's go ahead and look at this bass bus. So what I've done is I've done a similar thing here, where instead of using a group where I would select all these bass tracks and then hit Command G, instead of making a group, what I've done is I've just said, let's send their audio output to another track called bass bus. And then I have more processing here. So let's go ahead and listen to what my bass line sounds like. Now, one advantage to doing things this way, and something I wanted to show you along with my drum kit, is that look at how clean this all is. I can use these awesome big long sliders that I'm using here in session view to kind of mix everything. Like everything is on the front level. Like every single fader that I would want to see about any aspect of my mix is right here in front of me. And so this is so powerful. This is how it used to be done when you had huge mixing consoles. And something that's so nice about this is that it's extremely intuitive to kind of work with these faders. So check it out. Listen to just these different bass layers. I can actually kind of change and morph them. Right, so I'm able to quickly kind of change the way that this bass line is sort of presented, right? But it gets even cooler than this. Okay, let me show you the next thing. So I've also set up parallel processing for my bass bus, and I think that this is a really powerful thing as well. The next thing I've done is I've set up a parallel distortion bus. And again, the advantage here is that I can EQ this distortion separately, okay, from my bass bus. Like on my bass bus, I have an OTT and I have this compressor that's giving us this kind of fun ducking that's happening with the kick drum. But what's awesome about this parallel distortion is that I can EQ it separately from my bass bus, and I can bring only the elements that I want out of this roar instance into the bass. So let's go ahead and we're going to turn this on, but I'm going to sweep it in slowly. And I might do some tweaks before I bring it in. All right, let's go ahead and bring it in. All right, so without it, with it. Super awesome. So this is allowing me to bring in, as you can see, you know, some of the mids and some of the highs here in order to get kind of like a presence boost to this bass line using a roar tube distortion, right? So yeah, really pleasing result, a little bit of feedback there. Really, really nice. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is have another parallel bus just for the widening. And again, I can EQ this how I want. I want the wide aspect of this bass line to be kind of mid-rangey, right? And I'm using a chorus. So let's go ahead and I'll bring this in slowly too. Again, this is so powerful, and something else that I want to point out is that now that all of my instruments from this set thus far that I'm making, now that all of my instruments are here, right, I can now use my faders to not only mess, of course, with the, you know, the balance on the bass line or the different layers of the bass line or the different parallel processing buses, I can also now mess around with my drum kit parallel buses too. And what I can do is I can just use the faders to get the best possible balance between everything without having to go into anything, without having to open or close a group. It's all right here in front of me, okay? So let's go ahead and do that. Great. So I really enjoy that mix. I feel like I've done a decent job of balancing my different buses. And yeah, I'm off to the races. This is a really powerful thing. I highly recommend that you try doing this. And remember, this is so simple to do. It's essentially just taking advantage of Ableton's awesome routing capabilities, basically choosing the bus or the output of the instrument as an input to another track, and then using that as a monitor, okay? Cool, so thanks for watching, everybody. If Ableton's your thing, it's my thing too. I hope you enjoyed this. If you like this kind of thing, like, comment, subscribe. You all know what to do. I can't wait to reveal to you this surprise that I've got coming up here. Much love, everybody. I'll talk at you soon.